Okay, I get to do the welcome today, and once again, this is the 42nd year that we've been doing these regional history forums. 4 programs most of the years. Last year was a leap year, so we did 5, and some of the early years we did even more than that. So we add to this bank of wonderful historical information by all kinds of people that have contributed to it over the years. Only 2 times that we've had to do this outside of the courthouse building. The first year was 1977. That was the year after the 1996 flood, when the building was being installed on its new site. That was the 7th, and we hope the final time that the courthouse was moved. So this year, while the COVID-19 closures are in effect, is only the 2nd year in that entire time of doing the series that we've been doing it away from the building. In case you haven't visited the old courthouse, it features the sheriff's office, the jail, and the upstairs courtroom where we usually meet for these regional history forums. The building served not only as headquarters for Wasco County, but it was also for many years the Dalles City Hall. The original courthouse tells the story of our town's early governmental history. It was restored. It stays open thanks to the generosity of members and donors. These history forum programs have always been free. In normal years, we would pass a sock around for voluntary contributions from the crowd meeting there in the building. But since we can't do that this year, we invite you to help us continue these programs and to open those doors of the old courthouse again just as soon as we can, and to do it with your donation to the original Courthouse Preservation Corporation. So thank you in advance for those donations. And now I think our president is ready to give her word of greeting.
Thank you, Carl. Welcome, everyone. This is our final courthouse presentation for 2021. We hope you've enjoyed all of them so far, and if you missed any, they are available on our Facebook page and on our YouTube link, so you can go back and review them. Today's presenter is Rodger Nichols, talking about electric power in Wasco County, past and current.
The original Wasco County Courthouse. We hope you've enjoyed the season and will enjoy this program.
Get ready! Get set, go!
Most people leave the credits to the end of the program. I like to honor people up front because they made the program possible. Special thanks to Susan Buse, who helped locate many of the pictures at the Discovery Center and Wasco County Historical Museum. Thanks to Linda Wilson, who wrote a history of electricity in the county, which I borrowed from extensively. Special thanks to Sean Bailey of the Wasco County Clerk's Office, who helped me dig up voter records from 45 years ago. And always and forever to my sweet wife, Julie Reynolds. And now, let the show begin. Electricity first came to the Dalles in July 1888. So today, we're just a few months short of 135 years of electric power in Wasco County. The Dalles Electric Light Company built a wood-burning steam power generation plant at 7th and Union Streets. Unfortunately, we don't have any photos of that. But the wood to feed the boilers of the little steam plant was obtained from scows on the banks of the Columbia River. Enterprising sorts would cut wood near Cascade Locks and Stevenson and sail upriver to the Dalles, where they did a brisk trade with both steamboats and the power plant. Another source was from the Johns Lumber Mill flume at 14th and Mount Hood Streets. The actual sawmill was located near the confluence of the South Fork of Mill Creek and Crow Creek, and the flume was 16 miles long. In fact, in the background of this picture, you can see a guardhouse left over from old Fort Dalles. That power plant was sold to the Dalles Electric Telephone and Power Company in 1892. An announcement in the May 3rd, 1893 Chronicle said a new plant will be built on the northwest corner of 1st and Laughlin Streets. Here's a photo that most of us have seen on historical calendars and whatnot that depicts that plant. The Chronicle article described an 80 by 50 foot building with an additional 28 by 44 foot boiler room. That's where the wood fire heated the water in the boiler, which made the steam to run the generator. The article said the engine would have 243 horsepower and a flywheel 15 feet in diameter. And it was said also, it will then be the best plant on the Pacific coast for its size and can supply any demands made on it, even for a city double our population, which at the time was 3,542. So who were the people involved in this? On the left, Daniel M. French, president of the Dalles Electric Telephone and Power Company, is also the head of French and Company Bankers, also president of the Gilman French Land and Livestock Company and president of Arlington Bank as well. On the right is William H. Biggs, also on the Power Company board. He is the organization's secretary and also a director of the Wasco Warehouse Company and Gilman French. And yes, Biggs Junction is named after this guy. Love the beard. Here's an interior of the company showing it left manager Hugh Glenn, an unidentified gentleman, then in the far back a fellow named George Rutch, and at the table the bookkeeper identified only as a Mr. McGovern. In 1901, Wasco Warehouse and Milling Company is formed, and in 1902 they buy both Wasco Warehouse, which had been formed in 1883 to ship wool and other products out of the country, and the Electric Company. And they built this mill to grind grain grown in the region. And they had ambitious plans. No longer satisfied with a wood-burning plant, they wanted to harvest the power of a river. And so they went to the White River, just below the two falls not far from Ty Valley. It was a large undertaking, not only constructing the power plant in the canyon, but 27 miles of lines and poles needed to bring the power to the Dalles. Cost was $100,000 in gold dollars, equivalent to $30 million today, given inflation over the years. Customers in the Dalles and Dufur were given a 30-day free trial. The plant provided electricity for customers to operate up to 10 10-watt globes each evening for a month for $1.60. The electricity was shut off in the daytime. A highly complimentary article in the Oregon Daily Journal on February 4th, 1903, about the completion of the plant said, "The machinery is of the latest models. It conducts electricity under high voltage, stepping it down at the substation here before it is delivered to the customer." The journal reports the line from White River to the Dalles is more than twice as long as the one from Oregon City to Portland, yet has half the transmission losses. We mentioned the plant is located below the second of two falls in the White River. At the head of the falls, there is a concrete dam. This is what it looks like in the present day. And the water is carried in a 54-inch diameter, 120-foot-long wooden pipe, giving a fall of 119 feet to the water wheel pit, where there are 3 water wheels which power generators. Here's an interior shot there. The story also noted that the switchboard is of blue Vermont marble. Can't quite see that from here, though. And the writer also waxed enthusiastic about the early hydro project, saying, quote, "The Dalles has the best electric lights in Oregon as far as this writer knows. They are brilliant and never fail for a moment on account of low water. The feature of the water power is that it never fails. It runs alike winter and summer with power to spare for all the industries of the Dalles." The plant, by the way, provided power for half a century before ceasing operations in 1960. Here's a couple of shots of the more recent. This was done in the late 1990s. This is the exterior, and here is the interior. Now, having expended all of this money to construct the plant, they worked on getting customers. They need to pay off those loans. Those of you who attended last week's History Forum with my wife, Julie Reynolds, will recognize this as George Vouse of the Dalles, who recorded events in the Dalles in the early days of the 20th century. One of those events took place January 11th, 1904. His diary entry for that date refers to a demonstration by the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company to interest the Dalles people in the blessings of electricity. Here's what he said about it. "The only part of the show I remember was when Ella McCoy, as a sort of climax to the affair, had to shuffle down the stage of the Vote Opera House, placing her feet on electrified discs on the floor. These connected with metal discs on the soles of her shoes, which, through wires running up her legs and sides, lit an aurora effect of electric lights protruding from different parts of her anatomy, as well as the electric torch which she carried in her hand. She'd been warned not to watch her feet, with a result that much of the time her progress from the back to the front of the stage was sort of a preview of what electric signs of the future were to be, as she flashed bewilderingly on and off when her feet failed to coincide with the discs in the floor. When the power from White River reached the Dalles, much of it went into the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company to a massive 200-horsepower electric motor purchased from Thomas Edison's company to run all the mill's equipment. Here's a photo I took some time back of Jim Martin by the generator. In 1908, Thomas Edison himself and his wife Mina and daughter Madeline visited the Dalles, spent the night at the Umatilla house. There's no record of whether he visited the motor at the milling company, but the family was taken for a drive in the orchards, and he told this to the Chronicle: "Oregon is going to be one of the finest and best states in the Union. It has not yet fully awakened to its possibilities. It is only beginning to take notice. The coming years, it's going to realize the possibilities in electrical ways never dreamed of, with a magnificent water power all over the state. Here at the Dalles, you have sufficient water power to do anything you may want to do with it." In 1910, the Wasco Warehouse Milling sold its electrical interests, including the White River Powerhouse, the lines to the Dalles, all the lines delivering power to the residents and businesses. And who did they sell it to? Pacific Power and Light, which was formed that year from a number of smaller struggling companies that were able to make it by combining their forces. And from 1910 to 1941, Pacific Power and Light was the sole provider of power to the Dalles and Dufur. And now this word from Ready Kilowatt.
I'm a real live wire and I never tire. Yes, sir, I'm a red hot shot. I can cook your meals, turn the factory wheels, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. When you toast your toast or you roast your roast, it is I who makes them hot. I'm in your TV set with every show you get, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. I'm the little man who's always there. I'm a powerful high voltage guy. I'm so full of spark I can light up the dark, and you should see me wink my electric eye. I wash and dry your clothes, play your radios, I can heat your coffee pot. I am always there with lots of power to spare, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. Remember, just plug in. I'm ready.
Though the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company had sold all of its electrical interests in 1910, in July 31st, 1911, a fire, believed started by all things faulty wiring at the plant, burns the place to the ground, along with the Great Southern Railway depot located just east of the warehouse where the Union Pacific yards are today, and several outbuildings. And it was rebuilt. Here's an elevation drawing as seen from the river, and the now familiar warehouse under construction. And here's a view of the plant in its early days, showing the White River flower advertisement on the side of the building. Some of the equipment in those early days was considerably different. This was the horse-drawn equivalent of a lift bucket for linemen. We assumed that the horse would be unhooked from the wagon and the wheels blocked before a lineman climbed up that ladder. And one of the services they offered was most unusual. When I read this in the History Mystery feature in the Chronicle back in 2002, I got a nice letter from a gentleman named Max John, spelled Jahn. He wrote, "The gentleman on the right with his hand and arm on the barrel is my dad, Frank John," he wrote. "He was employed by Pacific Power and Light for approximately 40 years in the Dalles as line superintendent. And what the contraption did was hook onto the power lines overhead through a transformer, and then be clipped to your pipes in the winter to unfreeze them. It must have been a fairly healthy occupation, because the fellow wrote that his father passed away in March 1984 at the age of 105. He also identified the other fellow on the left as one Harry Rumsey. In the 1930s, residents began pushing to bring electricity to their homes and farms, and President Roosevelt created the REA on May 11, 1935, with an executive order. At that time, while cities had enjoyed electric power for many years, in 1935, quote, fewer than 11 of every 100 U.S. farms were receiving central station electric service. Main problem was the power companies were unwilling and or unable to string wires over long distances across farmland and backcountry at an affordable price. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 added new REA policies based on the agency's early experience. From that point, loans would be available for both large construction projects, for example, power plants and power lines, and for individual homes. for example, wiring and appliances. Repayment could extend up to 25 years, and the interest rate would be kept low by tying it to federal government borrowing rates. Importantly, individuals would not be held personally liable for default on an REA loan. Also, the Bonneville Power Act of 1937 authorized construction of Bonneville and Grand Coulee dams on the Columbia River, bringing extremely low-cost electricity to the region. Public nonprofit utilities such as cities, co-ops, and public utility districts were given preferential rights to the power from the federal dams built in the Columbia Basin. Now we have two parallel stories here, one for Northern Wasco County PUD, one for Wasco Electric Co-op. We'll start it here. The Granges in Wasco County began an effort to create a People's Utility District, but voters rejected a ballot measure in 1938. However, a second effort by a group of the Dalles businessmen called the Dalles Public Power and Industrial Club was approved by voters August 15, 1939. Here is the original board. Front row, William Seufert on the left, Charles Foster, and Roy Johnson, who happened to be Susan Buse's grandfather. The back row is Jess Ott and Cecil Byers. We're going to switch away from the PUD and look at the REA. Most of the farming community in Wasco County did not have electricity in 1940. Pacific Power and Light Company ran its power lines from town to town, but was very expensive for farms along the way to be hooked up. Eric Johnson, a rancher who lived near the Dalles, could see the power lines from his house, but he couldn't get service. He decided to meet with some of his neighbors to try to get electricity to all the farmers. They met for the first time on April 4th, 1940 in the Duffer City Hall. They elected a board of incorporators who served as the first board of directors. By June of 1940, the farmers had hired an engineer to map out the system. In August, REA granted a loan to Wasco Electric Cooperative in the amount of $240,000 for the construction of 264 miles of line to 342 members. The first annual meeting held in October of 1940 at the Civic Auditorium. The directors elected at the meeting included W.E. Davis, who then served as president of the board. Eric Johnson was hired as superintendent. Construction began March 31st, 1941. The members who would be able to use electricity helped the construction crew by clearing rights-of-way, digging holes, setting poles, etc. as a real cooperative effort. This photo is titled Installing Lines on the Hostetler Ranch. Not sure where that is, but that was from the archives. And on May 24th, 1941, at the end of a week of celebration of Bonneville Power and Appliance Week, President Davis took a long stick and tipped the energizing switch at the substation amid cheers from the crowd gathered for the great moment. Wasco Electric Cooperative was the first utility to purchase power from Bonneville Power Administration in Wasco County. Since that time, the area served by Wasco Electric Cooperative has grown to over 5,000 square miles in 5 counties: Wasco, Sherman, Jefferson, Gillum, and Wheeler. More than 3,000 members with 1,685 miles of lines and 10 substations to serve them. Now back to the PUD. Despite the fact the PUD was voted into existence in 1939, it hadn't put in a single pole by the time Wasco Electric Cooperative was energizing, and it wouldn't for a full decade. That's because PP&L fought them at every step of the way. The private utility filed numerous lawsuits and local challenges to the PUD's efforts to gain a city franchise permit and to operate in the county. In fact, 3 cases went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court, the first one in 1943, but city officials in the Dalles refused to accept and file a petition requesting there be an initiative ordinance granting the utility district a 20-year franchise. That led to the PUD board filing a writ of mandamus against the city officials to compel them to file a petition and call an election. The city appealed to the Oregon Supreme Court, and the court upheld the writ, leading to election in 1946. Here's an ad that they ran in favor of it. And here it is granting the franchise. But not really. The voters may have approved the franchise, but that was not the end of the obstruction. PP&L filed a suit against the district selling revenue bonds to finance construction, and that went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court again, which ruled in favor of the PUD in 1948. The bonds were sold. Voters approved the PUD's franchise. The city finally gave its approval. The first customers were served on April 7th, 1949. All right, story ends. Good to go? Not quite. The PUD had a franchise, but it did not have an exclusive franchise. Now, PP&L got its electricity from coal and gas-fired plants at a higher cost than the PUD because the PUD could buy much cheaper hydropower from Bonneville. It was assumed that once PUD got its lines in and citizens had a choice to save an estimated 15 to 20% on their bill, they'd naturally do the smart financial thing and switch to the lower-cost provider. Instead, however, PP&L appealed to the state's power commissioner, one George H. Flagg, to lower the rates to compete directly with the PUD. Though one thing about the situation, the PP&L was not allowed to raise the rates elsewhere to offset the lower rates in the Dalles. That would have to make up the losses from profits that would otherwise go to its stockholders. Well, the strategy almost worked. An article in the Salem Statesman Journal said that PUD in its first year had been running at a loss of $1,000 a month, and at one point was down to less than 200 customers and little reserves. An arrangement was made with Wasco Electric Cooperative to consolidate the office personnel and management of both entities. Interesting twist. In February 1950, the Bend Bulletin reported that 14 public power cooperatives and PUDs from Oregon and Washington, including Wasco Electric, Northern Wasco PUD, Klickitat PUD, and a bunch of others, made an effort to buy Pacific Power and Light. The PP&L common stock had just been acquired by an East Coast investors group for $16 million and some change. And when the new owners flew to Portland to see what they bought, they told reporters they hoped to sell PP&L at a profit within 6 to 9 months. Well, the consortium, which tentatively titled itself the Interstate Electric, Inc., offered the investors a chance to more than double their money with an offer of $34,400,000. Obviously, that didn't happen. We're not sure where the investors sold, but no doubt they got even more money out of the deal. Well, fortunately, by 1953, the PUD had turned the corner and was happily in the black. There's one more great electric power story that we haven't touched on yet, and most people don't think about that. But that work started in 1964 for the Pacific Northwest Pacific Southwest Intertie, the first high-voltage direct current transmission line to be constructed in the U.S. When it was energized in 1970, the 846-mile-long direct current portion of the line was heralded as the longest of its kind in the world. Here's a little clip from a BPA promotional film called Intertie.
Two of the lines are 500,000-volt alternating current lines, and two are 750,000-volt direct current lines. The Bonneville Power Administration, the Bureau of Reclamation, 4 private utilities, and the City of Los Angeles all are building portions of the project. Bonneville is building 3 lines and part of the 4th across central Oregon. They start where the power is generated at the Columbia River.
When I moved to the Dalles in 1974, as we mentioned before, PP&L lines would go up one side of a street, PUD lines on the other. Eventually, in 1976, PP&L agreed to sell its facilities in Wasco County, except those in Mosier, to Northern Wasco County PUD. Now, this is one of the slickest political tricks I've ever seen. In the month before the election, on a ballot measure for the PUD to buy those assets, PP&L sent out bills that took all those rate hikes that they had declined since 1949, 27 years worth of sticker shock, amounting to a 74% rate increase to PP&L ratepayers in the Dalles. Voters in the Dalles voted 73% yes in passing the bond. In Duffer, the vote was 95-1. Now, it took years for the PUD to gradually consolidate and remove those duplicate lines, but I think everybody here is fairly pleased that that did take place. And finally, in the 1990s, the PUD built 2 small hydroelectric power plants at the Dalles and Mcnairy dams to supplement its BPA power. These 2 hydroelectric projects are considered fish-friendly and generate clean, renewable, and carbon-free power. The first one was in June of 1991 when a 5-megawatt generation unit installed in the North Shore Fishway at the Dalles Dam began producing environmentally clean power. 38 million kilowatt hours the first year, and has continued to do so each year thereafter. The nice thing about it was accomplished without any cost to PUD customers through a power sales agreement. Puget Sound Power and Light agreed to buy the output for the first 21 years. The payments would cover the debt service. Then in 1997, a generator twice the size, or 10 megawatts, was completed at Mcnairy Dam, jointly owned with Klickitat PUD. Each of the utility receives 5 megawatts. And I just have to close on this. What's the story on the 2 Nichols in that photograph? Well, both of them are sitting on the edge on top of the housing that holds the turbine at the Dalles. One of them was set on edge more than 3 decades ago. A second was added more recently after most of the original crew retired, and the new crew wanted representation of their own. is determined that the Nichols remain on their edge. Their fitting symbol for the PUD itself, sturdy, dependable, and well-balanced. Thank you for listening.
You can make your family's life much brighter. You will find your work much lighter. It's as easy as can be to live better electrically. You can have more time for fun and pleasure. Family moments you will treasure. It's an opportunity to live better electrically.
And well, thank you, everybody, for listening. Questions, I think, at this point. Trish, do we have anything else to do before we go into question and answer?
Nope.
All right. All right. Help yourselves.
Okay, Roger.
Yeah.
This is Carolyn Wood.
Yeah.
I remember in 1970, well, yeah, I've been about February of 76. Bill Corchi, this was in the Governmental Affairs Committee down at the Recreation Cafe. We met, I don't know, many times a week or a session. Anyway, he asked me to be a spokesman for the campaign because PPN on a joint committee, a political action committee to promote the election, which took place, I think it was in May. You may have had a better date, but it was in the spring of 1976. And that was and I went around and I was one of several, but I happened to be one of the speakers and went around to many different of the local service organizations and anybody that's how we campaigned for elections in those days, to promote the election. But I also want to add, and of course it was a revenue bond, and that was relatively easy because that was going to be paid for not by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
But that was also the year that in July we passed the bond issue to build onto the high school, the West Wing. And in November, we voted to approve the establishment of what is now the Columbia Gorge Community College.
It was a good year.
It was a good year. The other thing I'd say is that when REA was building in, I think it was 1949, that we finally got electricity to Antelope. And my father, Roy Foreman, served on the REA board, I think it was for about 30 years, up until around sometime the late 80s. Anyway, he was very proud of that. And we all were, of course, we were all very glad to get electricity. And the other thing, oh shoot, something went away in my mind. I was going to add another point, but that's okay. Somebody else can talk.
Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate that. Yeah. Anybody?
So Roger, Mike Wacker here.
Yes, sir.
Everybody at home like we are.
Electricity came from the White River until 1960. Who or how was that used when the other electric companies were coming in?
Well, they actually used that at the PUD, I believe, and
Mike Wacker.
Yeah, REA. I'm not sure exactly who used that, but that was the information that I had, and I'm assuming that the two companies used some of that. So that's one thing I didn't get nailed down. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks.
Roger, I have a question. This is
Jenny.
Janny and Perry. Where did you find Ready Electric? Was that somebody's mascot in the utilities, or I know you're a aficionado when it comes to hunting for old videos, but that was years ago. Fantastic.
Yeah, that Ready Kilowatt was a copyrighted character that belonged to the. I'm not sure if it wasn't just PP&L, but other private electricity used that as a promotional. I think it was an electric consortium that had the rights to that, but it was not used by the co-ops and the PUDs. It was only used by private power companies. And I found it in YouTube, as a matter of fact. So yeah.
Very cool.
This
Roger, I had a question come in I'm not sure my video is not working, but can you hear me?
I can hear you, Carl.
It's Carl. Yeah, the question was, how did they get all that equipment down into the gorge there at White River? That's a huge, huge amount of equipment, and the weight of generators and all that. That's way down deep in the gorge there.
And the answer is, I have no idea, but I'm sure the real answer is very carefully, because those are heavy, heavy things. And I'm not sure exactly when steam-powered winches and shovels became available, but I do know they were used in the building of the Celilo Canal just a couple of years later. So I'm assuming that maybe there was some power equipment, very early power equipment available.
Roger, this is Jim Foster. There was a road that came down from where the substation is around the backside downriver, and then came back up to the site. And that road still exists. So my guess is that they managed.
Dick Stevens too.
They managed to take that material down that road, at least some of it.
Oh, great. Good to know. Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Roger, this is Carolyn again. Ready Kilowatt was the sponsor of the Saturday morning movies for the kids down at the Granada. In my memory is when we went in, let me see, what about in the 48, 49, 50 era? They sponsored the sort of Saturday morning movies.
Okay.
I'm an interloper, but not Jordan. It just makes me cry. I can't help it. And also singing the house, our house.
Yeah, my wife's father, Roger, came out here in 1938 to work on a Bonneville Dam.
Cool.
Yeah, isn't that cool? And my wife was born after that. I don't know if that was cool or not.
No comment.
No.
But
I don't blame you one bit, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Tell him that until he retired, he worked for.
Yeah, he retired there, what, 1998, I think.
No, 70s. In the
1978?
No, over. I don't know.
Well, anyway, he worked there for a very long time.
Okay.
He did all the substations here in the Dalles, in fact.
Oh, great.
Then he also worked on the intertie that you were talking about.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
Very interesting.
This is Dave Wand. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
One thing that came to my mind when one of the folks was asking the question about how they transported heavy equipment, I think it was probably 100 years ago or more that the logging industry was using those steam-powered donkeys. Maybe they were deployed for some of that activity.
Thank you. Appreciate that thought. Yeah. Other comments, questions?
I've got a question. Do you know why they ran both AC and DC lines down to California?
I don't know. I do know that the DC was this huge experiment, and that it was not possible earlier on to have long distance DC lines until the technology came up to it. In fact, I can't go on to all the details, but there was a big feud between Edison and Westinghouse having to do with AC and DC. And I believe, I'll probably get this wrong, but I believe that one of the proponents built the first electric chair to show how dangerous the other guy's electricity style was. So,
Roger?
Tesla's problem that, yeah.
When the Bonneville Power had a big presentation about their anniversary as a Discovery Center, and they have got 2 videos. In one of those, they explain about the DC line going to California, or AC, which I know, I never remember which one's which. But the reason for the conversion they gave then was that you lost less energy or whatever. I don't know the technical stuff, but said it transports it more economically. I mean, you get more. I mean, whatever it is you're measuring.
Okay, that sounds fair. And somebody it's mentioned Nikola Tesla, amazing electrical genius, unfortunately unheralded or unremembered as much as some of his competitors today.
I know my father-in-law went to some meeting with some people from Switzerland or Norway over the intertie for DC. Apparently over in Europe, they use it quite a bit.
Okay, good to know.
Well, the other thing that was about that presentation is up above where the converter station is now was a large swale, and they put experimental lines and other features in there, substation, and practiced or did experiments over the travel of electricity. It was I don't know, it was a 1 mile or 2 mile line. That was part of the presentation at the Discovery Center. And we also had an exhibit about it out there, probably maybe a year and a half ago. But BPA put out 2 video CDs. And those are very interesting about the coming of electricity and the building of the dams, but also a lot about that experimentation, which was part of the trial to determine, I think, taking the line to California. But they also talked about, and that the foreign, this was a feature that was used in Europe, and that comment about Switzerland makes sense to me. I mean, in relation to this, because they, this was a practice that was used over there, but I don't know why. Something to do, maybe it was distance. They didn't transport at extreme distances. Anyway, okay. This was all new development when they put the line into California.
Okay. I would like to ask, because I know that James Foster Esquire has been the attorney for the PUD for mumble decades, and wonder if you had a comment or two, Jim.
Sure. A couple of comments. One is Carolyn's exactly right. The reason they use DC is because it's got significantly less line loss. Whenever you transport energy through wire, you lose a certain amount of it. And AC apparently has a higher line loss than DC does. So the economics of the transmission costs are much better using a DC line. Now, why they have both DC and AC, I don't know. The other comment I'd have is that about the 2 hydro projects, the person that's most responsible for that is Harold Hakey. Harold was the general manager at the PUD when I started representing him back in 1987. And Harold had the imagination and the intelligence to be able to look at those 2 dams, both the Mcnairy Dam and the Dalles Dam, and see that there was water that was running through, bypassing their turbines, going to the bottom of the fish ladders, and that we could probably use that water on its trip from the top of the dam down to the bottom of the fish ladder and generate energy. And they're actually the only 2 non-federal projects on federal dams in the United States, as far as I know. And Harold really moved the dial on that, and the PUD has had huge benefits from it. But I think sometimes people forget who it was that really conceived of and developed those projects. Both the PUD and the co-op are healthy organizations. The PUD's grown dramatically. It went from essentially a $13 million budget to a $75 million budget since I've represented them. And it's gone from a 30 megawatt utility to now maxes out at about 155 megawatts. So there are tremendous changes, and the co-op serves the non-urban parts of our county and the surrounding counties eminently well. So yeah, we're very fortunate here.
I have a question for Mike Wacker, actually. Mike, thinking back to when we were both changing irrigation pipes out there in Ty Valley under the intertie line, do you remember the electrical charges you'd get on your feet when after the alfalfa was off and the irrigation was off? When we went to set those pipes out again, you get zapped with your feet. So there was something coming off of those lines, and I think they were the DC lines.
Mm-hmm. I remember that very well. It was really creepy.
It certainly was. We were supposed
the lines would glow at night too when it was raining.
Right, and we were supposed to drag attached chains to the ends of the irrigation pipes as we move them around. Ho ho. Not very practical.
I don't think I ever did that.
Me either. I just wanted to check.
Well, the experiment lines that were up behind the converter station, the video they showed on that, and this was all historical. I mean, when they showed it to us, this was history, and all this facility has been removed. But it was there for a long time, and most of us didn't even realize it existed. But it showed pictures of those lines at night, which actually looked like a string of LED lights twinkling between, I think it was about a 1 mile long length, if I remember right. And that was just normal. And it makes me wonder what's happening all around as we talk about the fields. The other thing I wanted to say is that in 1976, when we were running that campaign to get approved for PUD to purchase PP&L, our rate was our rate was like the lowest in the nation, around I think $17, and I don't remember what the quantity was. That's not something I'm fluent in, but I remember that we were told anyway that we had the cheapest electricity in the country.
Not at all surprised, because it's still one of the cheapest in the area. And
right.
We're very lucky to have hydropower in the West. You don't even want to think about what the people on the East Coast are paying for power these days.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, let me drop a name like Jim Foster just did. I'm thinking about Jim Weeks. Jim came out of North Dakota, and I forget I think he worked in Washington, D.C. at one point, but he came to the Dalles really to promote rural electric power. And he was publicity man, I think, for that whole project of the rural electrification. Then he worked for the Chronicle, and then he retired and became one of our prime historians, wrote several books, was one of the original board members at the original Courthouse. And back in the olden days, I remember many great conversations coming out of that history that Jim shared. Jim Weeks, another name to remember.
Yes, indeed. Great journalist.
I forgot the library book sale.
Yeah.
Very big promoter for the Historical Society and the Oregon Trail. He was part of the book about the Barlow Road. I think he had a considerable hand in that.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think I will remind folks that we're not passing the sock today, but we would certainly appreciate any contributions, and we'd love to have you as members, and there's some benefits to that. So if there's any more thoughts that people want to say about that.
Well, we can.
I hope we get back in the old place next year.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
And thanks, Carl, for all the work you did putting this together. And Trish.
Was a pleasure this year, and we'll put the commercial here at the end. We are a membership organization. You can join by going to the website Then there will be no admission fee when you visit the courthouse, and you get special invitations to our annual meeting and other special events. So here's the home page. When you go to the website, little circle there around join us, and that takes you to the membership form. Clip that out and send it in to the post office box, which is here on this last slide. We hope you will consider joining. Make your checks out to Original Courthouse Preservation Corporation. That's what the bank likes to see on the check. So thank you for attending. This is the last of the programs in the February Regional History Forum. Sometimes we do programs when we open up the courthouse in for the tourist season, and we hope there will be a tourist season. And I guess that's all, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yep.
Love it.